Make Peace with Nature is a syndicated public affairs presentation of this station dealing with solutions to problems of energy, conservation, and the environment. Today's program will be hosted by David Surber.
Hello, and welcome to Make Peace with Nature. On August the 8th, 2005, President George W. Bush signed the Energy Policy Act in a ceremony at the Sandia National Laboratories in New Mexico. Before he applied his name to the act, he observed, quote, "Of all our nation's energy sources, only nuclear power plants can generate massive amounts of electricity without emitting an ounce of air pollution or greenhouse gases," end quote. Commercial nuclear power has been employed in the United States since December the 2nd, 1957, when President Dwight Eisenhower employed a signaling device from his office in the White House to start a plant near Pittsburgh which employed the power of the atom to make heat, which boiled water into steam, spinning turbines to generate electricity. That plant supplied electricity for nearby Pittsburgh for more than 20 years. Today, America has 104 nuclear power plants which provide 20% of our power needs. France, by comparison, derives 80% of its power needs by operating nuclear reactors. Japan also relies heavily on nuclear power for its electricity requirements. I have with me in the studio a man who can help us understand the benefits of commercial nuclear power. Scott Peterson is a trained journalist, extensively published, and Vice President for Communications of the Nuclear Energy Institute, NEI. NEI believes, and Scott agrees, that nuclear plants are safe, reliable, and secure, and that they can generate electricity without risk, and as President Bush said, without emitting an ounce of air pollution or greenhouse gases. More after this.
The views expressed on Make Peace with Nature are those of the participants and not necessarily those of this station or the program's underwriters.
It is a pleasure to welcome for the second time Scott Peterson, Vice President for Communications of NEI, Washington, D.C. based trade association. Is
yes,
that a fair
correct.
statement?
Thank you, David.
By all means. Great pleasure. The last time we talked, we were in Kyoto.
Absolutely.
Right. Tell us, what is NEI?
The Nuclear Energy Institute is a policy group that has as its members companies that use nuclear technology for commercial purposes, whether that's electricity production, the use in medicine, the use in looking at structural issues like bridges and other things to make sure that they're built correctly and they'll support loads. So it's really a group that represents all of those companies in Washington with legislative and regulatory policy and in communications.
Mm-hmm. It was previously called the Atomic Industrial Forum, and then there was an interim name.
U.S. Council for Energy Awareness.
Right, so those are the forerunners of the Nuclear Energy Institute?
That's right. We've been an organization in Washington for more than 50 years now.
Right. Do you represent every investor-owned utility which has a nuclear power plant?
We sure do.
Here in Canada and abroad as well?
Certainly in the United States, as well as the manufacturers of reactors and the companies that service them, and companies that mine and enrich uranium as well. And then some international members as well who want to learn from the U.S. experiences that we have in our power plants and in our enrichment facilities.
Mm-hmm. Now, the plant that I mentioned at the beginning, which was at Shippingport, Pennsylvania, which was taken offline in some years, 20 years or so after it was placed online, it simply got to the end of its useful life.
Well, it was one of the plants that was really a prototype for the plants that we have today, even though we're about 3 generations removed from that prototype. But it's interesting, David, because we really come full circle now with nuclear energy, because that plant was built in Pittsburgh because of the air quality issues that city was having from steel mills and other things. So it needed a clean source of electricity that wasn't going to contribute to the air pollution there. And here we are some 50 years later looking at issues like air quality and global climate change, and that really is positioning nuclear power at the forefront of the energy situation today.
Now, you obviously agree with President Bush, whom I'm sure I quoted correctly when he said in the statement he made at Sandia Laboratories, of all of our nation's energy sources, I should say, only nuclear power plants can generate massive amounts of electricity. Since he used the word plant, I guess he wasn't thinking about solar, wind, or geothermal, so I'm not trying to be unfair to him. So anything that's online and up 24/7 would be a plant. So the other plants would be either gas-fired or coal-fired, and I guess in some cases oil-fired.
Right, a little bit of oil left in the electricity system.
Yeah. So, but the other ways of generating electricity in this country are by burning coal, by burning natural gas, or in some cases oil.
And we have a sliver of renewable energy in this country. Solar, wind, hydro together produce about 10% of our electricity in the United States, and hydro really is the big chunk of that 10%. But when you look at the emission-free sources of electricity that we have today in the United States, nuclear power plants generate more than 70% of all that emission-free electricity. So as President Bush said, and as many on both the Democrat and Republican side in Congress support, nuclear energy has to be part of our energy portfolio today and going forward if we're worried about the dual issues of energy security and supply, as well as what we're going to do about reducing greenhouse gases.
Right. You believe, and it seems clear, that the nuclear power plant, whatever the objection some people have to it, emits zero greenhouse gases.
It does during the production of electricity, that's correct.
Right. Why is it then, do you think, that the environmentalists don't uniformly embrace it?
Well, I think environmentalists are certainly coming to a new place with nuclear power today because of climate change. And you see many mainstream environmental organizations who agree that nuclear power has to be part of the solution that we have in this country, not only to generating electricity, but to reducing greenhouse gases and improving our air quality. I think what you see are some still strident anti-nuclear groups who, no matter what the situation that we face in electricity supply or our climate, are going to oppose nuclear energy on any ground that they can manufacture. I think when you look at the public opinion on nuclear energy today, it certainly is different than it was decades ago. About 2/3 of the public supports the use of nuclear power. They also support the construction of new nuclear plants, which is something our industry is now looking at to meet both a 30% increase in electricity demand by 2030 and this issue of how can we move forward with energy production in a way that doesn't contribute greenhouse gases to the atmosphere.
We're looking at some video of some modern plants, obviously not the one at Shippingport, Pennsylvania, offline. My second question would have been then, after you resolve the issue of the environmental opposition and in some cases now their agreement, why have there been no nuclear power plants built in the United States for many, many years? It's more than 20 years, isn't it?
Yes, and the electricity system in the United States in the 70s and 80s, energy companies built several scores of baseload power plants, whether it was coal or nuclear. And so over the last 15 years or so, we've really been living off of the excess capacity that we had from building those nuclear power plants and those large coal plants. And so we built really just smaller gas-fired plants that you could bring on